The emergency council chamber on Zephyria Prime buzzed with desperate whispers as Ambassador Kelthera reviewed the final transmission from their outer colonies. The holographic displays showed the same terrifying image across 17 star systems, massive Vorthak war fleets advancing like a plague of metal locusts, consuming everything in their path. The Hendar system fell 3 cycles ago, reported General Vexthen, his usually steady voice cracking. They took every ship, every station, every civilian transport. Nothing escaped. Kelthera's forearms trembled as she processed the intelligence reports. The Zephyrian Confederation had stood for 12,000 years, weathering countless conflicts through diplomacy and strategic alliances. Now they faced extinction at the hands of the Vorthak Empire, a species that viewed conquest not as politics but as a religious calling. How long before they reach our core worlds? She asked. 18 standard cycles at their current pace, Vexthen replied. Our combined fleets can maybe slow them down by 3 or 4 cycles, but we cannot stop them. They have numbers, they have technology, and they have something we lack. Which is? They enjoy killing. The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems. Kelthera had dedicated her life to finding peaceful solutions, but the Vorthak didn't negotiate. They didn't accept surrender. They simply conquered, enslaved, and moved on to the next target. We need allies, she said finally. The Corvani Republic is too far away. The Thessian hegemony is already fighting their own war. The Mineral Consortium cares only about trade routes. She paused, considering options that seemed increasingly hopeless. What about the newer species? The ones on the galactic rim? Science advisor NYTHL activated his datapad, scrolling through species classifications. Most rim species lack advanced technology. The Altarians have impressive manufacturing capabilities but no military experience. The Cerulean Collective has excellent defensive systems but refuses to engage in offensive operations. What about the humans? The question came from junior diplomat Zelos, barely past her academy training. Senior staff members exchanged glances that ranged from skeptical to amused. The humans? Vexthen's mandibles clicked in the Zephyrian equivalent of a scoff. They've been spacefaring for what, 200 years? They have perhaps 50 colonized systems and their technology is primitive compared to ours. But, Zelos persisted, their expansion rate is unprecedented. No species in recorded history has spread so quickly across so many different environment types. And their cultural broadcasts suggest they have extensive experience with warfare. Kelthera's primary eyes focused on the young diplomat while her secondary eyes continued monitoring the tactical displays. Experience with warfare against other humans, using chemical explosives and metal projectiles. What could they possibly offer against the Vorthak? NYTHL consulted his files. According to our cultural exchanges, humans have an unusual approach to military doctrine. Where most species develop specialized roles, warriors, builders, thinkers, humans train their military personnel across multiple disciplines. A human soldier might also be an engineer, a medic, and a communications specialist. Inefficient, Vexthen muttered. Specialization creates excellence. Perhaps, Zelos said quietly. But their historical records show humans adapting to impossible situations by combining roles in unexpected ways. And they seem to have strong emotional responses to requests for help from allies. Ambassador Kelthera stood silent for several minutes, her forearms folded in deep contemplation. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on her shoulders. The Vorthak fleets continued their advance, unstoppable and merciless. Traditional military solutions had failed. Economic warfare meant nothing to a species that simply took what they wanted. Diplomatic overtures to the Vorthak resulted only in recordings of their victims' final moments. How quickly could we contact them? She asked. Hyperspace communication to human space would take approximately 6 cycles, NYTHL reported. Their capital world is called Earth, though they have several major administrative centers. And their government structure? Complex. They appear to have multiple competing political entities that somehow coordinate during external threats. Our diplomatic protocols suggest approaching through their United Nations organization. Vexthen's combat experience made him naturally suspicious of untested allies. Ambassador, with respect, we're considering asking a species that hasn't fought anyone except themselves to help us against the most successful military force in this galactic sector. The Vortak have conquered 47 star systems in the past 50 years. The humans struggle to maintain 50 systems in total.
Do we have better options? Kelthera asked pointedly. The silence that followed provided her answer. Very well.
Prepare a formal request for military assistance. Include all relevant intelligence about Vortak capabilities, our current defensive positions, and projected timelines. Make it clear that we're not asking them to sacrifice themselves. We need strategic advisors, military planners, anyone who might see something we've missed.
Zelos worked frantically at her communication station. Ambassador, should I emphasize the humanitarian aspects?
Human cultural broadcasts suggest they respond strongly to civilian casualties and refugee situations.
Include everything.
If they're as emotionally driven as you suggest, give them every reason to care about our survival.
The transmission took 4 hours to prepare and verify.
Kelthera reviewed the final message, knowing it might be her species' last hope for continued existence. The request was formal but urgent, explaining their desperate situation without appearing weak. They offered access to advanced Zephyrian technology, trade agreements, and formal alliance treaties in exchange for whatever assistance humanity could provide.
Transmission sent, Zelos reported.
Estimated arrival time is 5 cycles, 14 hours. Now we wait, Kelthera said. And we prepare for the possibility that we're entirely on our own.
3 cycles later, long-range sensors detected the first Vortak scout fleets entering their outer defensive perimeter. The massive alien ships moved with predatory confidence, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets.
Zephyrian defensive stations opened fire at maximum range, their energy beams lashing out across the void like desperate fingers grasping for salvation.
The Vortak response was swift and brutal.
Their heavy cruisers absorbed the defensive fire while their escort vessels flanked the stations from multiple directions.
Within hours, 7 defensive platforms had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated debris.
They're not even slowing down, Vex then reported from the command center. They're treating our outer defenses like target practice. Kelthera monitored the battle from the civilian evacuation center, watching refugee transports flee toward the inner systems while their military held the line.
Each transport carried thousands of families, children who might never see their homeworlds again if the Vortak advance continued unchecked. Any response from human space, she asked. Nothing yet, Zelos replied.
But it's only been, her words were cut off as every communication system in the facility suddenly activated simultaneously.
A voice spoke in perfectly accented Zephyrian, though the underlying tone suggested the speaker was definitely not native to their species. Zephyrian Confederation Command, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Response Fleet.
We received your request for assistance and we're currently in hyperspace en route to your position.
Estimated arrival is 18 hours.
Please transmit current tactical situation and any relevant intelligence updates. The command center erupted in surprised chatter.
Admiral Chen continued speaking over the noise.
We're bringing everything we can spare, fleet elements, engineering corps, and some specialized units that might prove useful against your Vortak problem. We've reviewed your intelligence package and we have some ideas.
Kelthera felt her first genuine hope in weeks. Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Kelthera. We're honored by your rapid response. How large is your force? That's a complicated question, Ambassador.
We're bringing approximately 40 vessels, though our doctrine might be different from what you're expecting.
We don't typically engage in large fleet actions the way galactic powers prefer.
Vex then frowned at his displays.
40 ships against the entire Vortak fleet?
Admiral, our intelligence suggests they have over 300 vessels in this sector alone.
Yes, we saw that in your briefing materials. General Vex then, isn't it? We've dealt with numerical disadvantages before.
Sometimes the solution isn't to match enemy strength directly, but to change the nature of the engagement entirely.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, we noticed that Vortak tactics rely heavily on overwhelming local defenders through superior firepower and numbers. They seem to prefer direct confrontation where they can leverage their advantages. But they also appear to have some interesting vulnerabilities in their logistics and command structure.
Admiral Chen's voice took on a tone that somehow managed to sound both professional and slightly predatory. We specialize in asymmetric warfare, General.
Give us 18 hours to get into position, and we'll show you how humans fight when they're trying to save their friends.
The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian command staff staring at their displays in confusion and growing curiosity.
16 hours later, long-range sensors detected the human fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Vex then immediately activated full scanner sweeps, trying to understand what they were facing.
"This doesn't make sense," he muttered, studying the readings.
"These ships, they're smaller than our cruisers, but the mass readings are all wrong.
And their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases."
Kelthera joined him at the tactical station.
"Show me."
The main display showed 40 human vessels arranged in a loose formation that seemed almost casual compared to the rigid battle lines favored by most galactic militaries. But, as the scanner data updated, strange details became apparent. The ships had unusual hull configurations, with what appeared to be modular sections that could be reconfigured during flight. Their weapon signatures indicated both energy systems and, something else, projectile launchers of some kind, but operating at velocities that should have been impossible for kinetic weapons.
"They're requesting permission to dock with our command station," Zelos reported. "Admiral Chen wants to meet in person to coordinate strategy." "Granted." "And, Zelos?
Make sure our cultural briefing materials are available. I have a feeling we're about to learn something important about our new allies."
Admiral Sarah Chen arrived 3 hours later aboard a transport that looked more like an engineering workshop than a military shuttle.
She emerged from the docking bay accompanied by a small team that included individuals wearing distinctly different uniforms, military personnel, but also people who appeared to be engineers, technicians, and specialists whose roles weren't immediately obvious. Chen herself was shorter than most humans in the galactic databases, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her surroundings within seconds of arriving. Her handshake with Ambassador Kelthera was firm and brief, conveying both respect and urgency.
"Ambassador, thank you for the briefing materials.
We've been studying Vorthack tactical patterns during our approach, and we think we understand why they've been so successful.
Please, share your insights."
Chen activated a portable holographic projector, displaying the current tactical situation with human modifications overlaid in blue. The Vorthack fight like conquerors because they are conquerors. They expect resistance to follow predictable patterns, defensive lines, fleet engagements, attempts to protect fixed installations. They've optimized their entire military doctrine around breaking through exactly those kinds of defenses.
Vex then studied the projection carefully. "Yes, that matches our analysis."
They overwhelm defensive positions, eliminate our fleets, then systematically occupy civilian centers.
"It's brutally effective." "It is, as long as you play by their rules."
Chen smiled, and something in her expression made Kelthera suddenly understand why humans had spread across 50 star systems in only 2 centuries. But humans have a long history of changing the rules when the existing ones don't work in our favor.
"What do you propose?" "We're not going to fight their fleets directly. We're going to fight their war machine."
Admiral Chen's words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Zephyrians understood about interstellar warfare. General Vexthan's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep concern among his species. "Admiral, forgive my skepticism, but the Vorthack war machine consists of 300 heavily armed vessels supported by mobile manufacturing platforms, supply chains spanning 47 conquered systems, and command structures that have never been successfully disrupted.
How exactly do you propose to fight something that massive?" Chen's tactical officer, a tall woman with multiple cybernetic implants, stepped forward and activated additional holographic displays.
"General, may I introduce Commander Maria Santos, our chief intelligence analyst.
She's been studying Vorthack operations for the past 18 hours.
Santos began highlighting specific elements within the enemy fleet formation. The Vorthack may be successful conquerors, but they're also predictable. Their success has made them rigid. Every battle follows the same pattern: overwhelming assault, total victory, systematic occupation.
They've never had to adapt because they've never needed to."
She zoomed in on the massive command ships at the center of the Vorthack formation.
"Look at their command structure.
3 primary command vessels, each controlling specific fleet sections. Their coordination is flawless, but it's also centralized. Everything flows through those command ships." Vex then examined the data carefully. "Yes, we identified those vessels as primary targets early in our defensive planning.
Unfortunately, they're heavily shielded and surrounded by escort fleets. No weapon system we possess can penetrate their defenses at sufficient range. That's because you're thinking about this as a weapons problem, Chen said. What if it's actually an engineering problem? Before anyone could respond, alerts began blaring throughout the command center. Tactical displays lit up with new contacts as the Vortak main fleet began moving toward the inner system.
The alien vessels advanced in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting the light of distant stars like a swarm of metallic predators.
They'll reach our next defensive line in 14 hours, Vex then reported. Admiral, whatever you're planning, we're running out of time. Actually, we're right on schedule. Chen activated her personal communicator. All human units, this is Admiral Chen. Execute Operation Toolbox. I repeat, execute Operation Toolbox.
The human fleet began moving immediately, but not toward the advancing Vortak forces. Instead, they spread out across the system in what appeared to be completely random directions. Some ships moved toward asteroid fields, others toward the outer planets, and several simply disappeared from sensors entirely.
Admiral, Kelthera said carefully, your fleet appears to be dispersing?
That's correct. Ambassador, you asked for leaders, engineers, and bombers. We brought all three, but probably not in the way you expected.
Chen pulled up additional displays showing human ship configurations.
Every vessel in our fleet serves multiple functions. We don't have separate military ships, engineering vessels, and bomber craft. We have platforms that can rapidly reconfigure to serve whatever role the tactical situation requires. Commander Santos highlighted one of the human vessels moving toward a distant asteroid cluster. That ship left Earth configured as a heavy cruiser. In 6 hours, it will be a mobile mining platform extracting materials that don't officially exist. In 12 hours, it will be something the Vortak have never encountered before.
I don't understand, Vex then admitted. General, how do the Vortak supply their fleets during extended campaigns?
They carry enormous supply ships and establish forward bases on conquered worlds.
Their logistics network is actually one of their greatest strengths. They can maintain operations far from their home systems indefinitely. And what happens when that network gets disrupted? It doesn't.
No one has ever successfully disrupted Vortak supply lines.
Chen's smile took on a predatory quality that made several Zephyrians unconsciously step backward.
General, meet the human military philosophy. If something has never been done, that just means you're the first one to try it. Over the next several hours, reports began filtering in from across the system.
Human engineering teams were performing operations that defied conventional understanding of space-based construction. They weren't building weapons or defensive platforms.
They were building something entirely different. Admiral, Zelos reported from her communication station, our long-range sensors are detecting some unusual activity near the outer asteroid belt.
It appears your ships are manufacturing something? Mining and manufacturing, yes.
We brought raw materials, but we needed local resources to complete our project.
What kind of project requires asteroid mining in the middle of a battle?
The kind that changes the nature of the battle.
Chen activated a secure channel to her fleet commanders. Status report, all units. Responses came back in rapid succession. Engineering Team Alpha, tunnel networks complete and ready for activation.
Team Beta, manufacturing platforms online, production rate exceeding projections. Team Gamma, payload deployment systems tested and confirmed operational. Vex then studied the tactical displays with growing confusion. Admiral, I'm seeing massive construction activity, but nothing that appears to be military in nature.
Are you building some kind of fortification? Not fortification, General.
Subterfuge. Before he could ask for clarification, proximity alarms began screaming throughout the command center. The Vortak fleet had accelerated their advance and was now only 8 hours from contact with Zephyrian defensive positions. Admiral, Kelthera said urgently, whatever you're planning, the Vortak are moving faster than anticipated.
Our outer defense grid won't hold them for more than a few hours. It's not supposed to hold them, Ambassador. It's supposed to channel them.
Chen activated the main tactical display and began highlighting specific areas within the system. The Vortak advance follows predictable patterns. They'll punch through your outer defenses here, here, and here. Then, they'll regroup and advance toward your populated worlds along these approach vectors.
Yes, that's exactly what our strategic analysis predicted. How does that help us?
Because, Ambassador, we've spent the last 18 hours turning those approach vectors into the largest trap in galactic history. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of the entire system, with human modifications highlighted in blue. What had appeared to be random construction activity was revealed to be part of an enormous, coordinated engineering project.
The asteroid fields, outer planets, and seemingly empty space between worlds had been transformed into something unprecedented. Commander Santos took over the presentation. The Vorthack think in terms of ship-to-ship combat and planetary occupation. They don't expect the battlefield itself to be weaponized. Weaponized how? General, what do you know about human mining techniques? Vexthen's confusion was evident. Mining? Admiral, this hardly seems like the time for industrial discussions. Actually, it's exactly the time.
Chen activated detailed scans of the asteroid field operations. Humans have been using explosives for mining operations for over 1,000 years. We've gotten very good at placing charges in precisely the right locations to achieve specific results.
The scans revealed something that made every Zephyrian in the command center stare in stunned silence. The asteroids weren't being mined in the traditional sense.
They were being converted into massive projectile weapons, with precisely calculated charge placements that would send multi-million-ton rocks along ballistic trajectories that intersected the Vorthack approach vectors. "You're turning asteroids into artillery shells," Vexthen whispered.
That's just the beginning. Santos zoomed in on one of the outer planets, showing extensive human activity on its surface.
While our mining teams were preparing asteroid projectiles, our engineering core was installing something we call gravitational anchors on this planet's moon.
Gravitational anchors? Devices that can temporarily increase the moon's gravitational field by a factor of 12. When the Vorthack fleet enters the gravity well, they'll experience forces they never anticipated.
Ships that heavy aren't designed for sudden course changes. Kelthera found herself struggling to process the implications.
Admiral, are you suggesting that you've turned our entire star system into a weapon? Not a weapon, Ambassador. A machine.
A very large, very complicated machine designed to do one specific job.
Which is to prove that humans are really, really good at breaking things that seem unbreakable. The Vorthack advance continued with mechanical precision, their massive fleets moving through space like dark promises of annihilation.
They had conquered 47 star systems using the same tactics, the same overwhelming approach that had never failed them. They had no reason to expect this system to be different. 6 hours before projected contact with Zephyrian defenses, the Vorthack fleet encountered the first human modification to the battlefield. Long-range sensors detected massive objects moving through space along trajectories that intersected their planned approach route. The Vorthack commander dismissed them as natural phenomena, asteroids displaced by gravitational fluctuations, nothing more than space debris that could be easily avoided or destroyed. His ships adjusted course slightly to avoid the largest objects while maintaining their attack formation. That decision saved the human plan from premature discovery, but it also placed the Vorthack fleet exactly where Admiral Chen wanted them. "Admiral," Santos reported from the Human Fleet Coordination Center, "enemy forces are following projected approach vector 7.
All systems are ready for activation."
Chen nodded to her team of specialists, engineers, tacticians, and what the Zephyrians were beginning to realize were not conventional bomber pilots, but something far more dangerous. They were humans who had spent their entire lives learning how to solve impossible problems with insufficient resources and unlimited creativity.
"Initiate sequence 1, Chen ordered."
Across the system, human engineering teams activated their gravitational anchor systems. The moon orbiting the fourth planet suddenly began exerting gravitational forces that should have been impossible for an object of its size. The Vorthack fleet, traveling at significant velocity through what they expected to be predictable space, found themselves caught in a gravity well that yanked their carefully maintained formation into chaos. Ships collided with each other as courses changed unexpectedly. Smaller vessels were pulled directly into larger ones, while heavy cruisers found themselves spinning out of control as their navigation systems struggled to compensate for gravitational forces that defied their understanding of physics.
"What's happening to them?" Zelos asked, watching the Vorthack fleet dissolve from perfect formation into scattered confusion. "Physics," Chen replied. "Human engineering teams have been modifying gravitational fields for mining and construction operations for decades. We've just never had the opportunity to test the technology on this scale."
But the gravitational disruption was only the beginning. As Vorthack ships struggled to regain formation control, the asteroid projectiles that their sensors had dismissed as space debris began reaching the end of their carefully calculated trajectories. The first asteroid impact struck a Vorthack heavy cruiser amidships, the multi-million-ton rock traveling at precisely the right velocity to punch completely through the vessel's hull. The ship didn't explode, it simply folded around the impact point like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. Then, the second impact came, and the third, and the fourth. What the Vorthack had assumed were random asteroids revealed themselves to be precision-guided projectiles launched by human engineering teams who understood ballistics in ways that most galactic species had never considered.
They're not random impacts, Vex then realized, studying the tactical display.
Every asteroid is hitting exactly where it will cause maximum damage to fleet coordination. Human military doctrine emphasizes disrupting enemy capabilities rather than simply destroying enemy assets, Chen explained.
We don't need to destroy their entire fleet.
We just need to break their ability to fight as a coordinated force.
The Vorthack response was swift and predictable.
Their remaining ships opened fire on the incoming asteroids, their powerful energy weapons vaporizing the rocky projectiles before they could reach their targets. But, stopping the asteroid bombardment required them to expose their positions and energy signatures to human sensors that had been quietly cataloging every detail of their fleet composition.
Initiate Sequence 2, Chen ordered.
The human ships that had seemed to disappear from sensors suddenly reappeared, but not as the vessels that had originally entered the system. Modular components had been reconfigured, manufacturing platforms had produced new weapons systems, and what had been exploration vessels were now revealed to be something entirely unexpected.
Admiral, Vex then said slowly, what exactly are those ships now?
Chen's smile was the expression of someone who had spent years preparing for this exact moment.
General, meet human bomber doctrine. We don't build bombers.
We build ships that become bombers when they need to. The transformed human vessels moved through space with purpose that defied every assumption the Vorthack had made about their enemies. What had appeared to be simple cargo haulers and exploration ships now revealed weapons systems that had been assembled from scratch using asteroid materials and human engineering ingenuity. General Vex then watched the tactical display with the fascination of someone witnessing the impossible. Admiral Chen, those ships, they're not the same vessels that entered our system.
Correct. Human military philosophy emphasizes adaptability over specialization. We don't build different ships for different missions, we build platforms that can become whatever the mission requires. Chen activated detailed scans showing the transformed vessels.
Every ship in our fleet carries manufacturing equipment, raw materials, and engineering teams trained to reconfigure systems during operations. Commander Santos highlighted specific modifications that had been completed during the 18-hour preparation period.
This vessel entered the system as a geological survey ship.
It's now a long-range artillery platform capable of accelerating projectiles to 12% of light speed using materials we refined from local asteroids.
12% of light speed?
Kelthera stared at the readings in disbelief.
Our most advanced weapons achieve perhaps 3%.
Physics is the same for everyone, Ambassador.
The difference is how creatively you apply it.
The Vorthack fleet, still struggling to recover from the gravitational disruption and asteroid bombardment, suddenly found themselves facing weapons that operated outside their understanding of conventional space warfare. The human ships didn't close to traditional combat range. Instead, they positioned themselves at distances where Vorthack return fire would take several minutes to reach them, while their own projectiles crossed the gap in seconds. The first human strike targeted the Vorthack communication arrays. Instead of explosive warheads, the projectiles carried precisely engineered electromagnetic pulse devices that had been manufactured in space using techniques the Vorthack had never encountered.
When the projectiles detonated, they didn't destroy the Vorthack ships, they severed the communication links between vessels.
They're isolating individual ships from the fleet coordination network, Vex then realized.
Without communication, the Vorthack can't maintain their tactical advantage.
That's the theory, Chen agreed.
But, we're about to find out if it works in practice.
The effect was immediate and devastating. Vorthack vessels that had operated as a perfectly coordinated fleet suddenly became individual ships operating independently. Their tactical doctrine, optimized for overwhelming force applied with precision timing, began to collapse as ship commanders found themselves unable to coordinate with their neighbors. Some Vorthack captains attempted to close with the human ships, but they discovered that their targets refused to remain stationary for traditional combat. The human vessels moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually calculated to maintain optimal firing positions while denying the Vortak any opportunity to bring their superior close-range weapons to bear.
How are they moving like that? Vex then asked. Those maneuvers should be impossible for vessels of that size. Santos pulled up engineering schematics that showed radical modifications to the human ship's propulsion systems. While our mining teams were preparing asteroids, our engineers were installing additional maneuvering thrusters using materials extracted from the outer planets. Every human ship now has 3 times the maneuverability it possessed when it arrived.
You've been rebuilding your entire fleet during the battle?
We've been optimizing our fleet for this specific engagement, Chen corrected.
Admiral, that's what humans do. We study the problem, we identify the resources available, and we build the tools necessary to solve it.
The Vortak response grew increasingly desperate as their traditional tactics proved ineffective against an enemy that refused to fight according to established conventions. Several Vortak commanders attempted to break off from the engagement and regroup at longer range, but they discovered that retreat was no longer an option.
Initiate Sequence 3, Chen ordered.
The seemingly empty space between the Vortak fleet and their potential escape routes suddenly came alive with human activity. What had appeared to be vacant areas of space revealed themselves to be filled with devices that human engineering teams had been placing throughout the system.
Proximity mines?
Vex then guessed.
Something more sophisticated. Santos activated displays showing the true nature of the human space-based installations.
We call them persistence fields.
They're designed to prevent faster-than-light travel within a specific area of space. The implications hit Kelthera immediately. You've trapped them. They can't retreat using hyperspace drives.
And they can't advance either, because advancing means moving deeper into our prepared battlefield. Chen's expression remained professionally calm, but her eyes held the gleam of someone executing a plan that had succeeded beyond expectations. The Vortak fleet is now contained within a volume of space that we've spent 18 hours turning into the most sophisticated trap in galactic history.
But the humans weren't finished.
While the Vortak struggled with communication disruption and movement restriction, additional human ships began arriving throughout the system. These weren't reinforcements, they were specialized units that had been traveling to predetermined positions while the main fleet engaged the enemy.
Admiral, Zelos reported, we're detecting human vessels near the outer system border, but they appear to be mining ships? Engineering Corps, Chen corrected. They've been working on a project that requires very precise timing.
What kind of project?
The kind that ends wars.
On the tactical display, new contacts appeared near several of the system's outer planets. The human engineering vessels had been installing something during the battle, massive constructions that had been hidden behind planetary bodies to avoid detection.
Now those constructions revealed their purpose. Are those mass drivers? Vex then asked in disbelief. Planetary-scale mass drivers, Santos confirmed.
We've been using the gravitational fields and rotational energy of the outer planets to build artillery systems capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The first planetary mass driver fired, launching a projectile that had been precisely calculated to arrive at the Vortak fleet's position in 47 minutes. The projectile itself was unremarkable, a simple iron slug weighing approximately 50 tons. But, when accelerated to 20% of light speed, it carried kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon.
The projectile will arrive in 47 minutes, Chen announced.
The Vortak fleet has that long to make a decision.
What kind of decision? Kelthera asked.
Surrender, or discover what happens when an irresistible force meets a hopefully movable object.
The Vortak fleet commanders, monitoring the incoming projectile, recognized the implications immediately.
A 50-ton mass traveling at 20% of light speed would penetrate any known armor and destroy any ship it struck. But the real message wasn't about the destructive power of a single projectile, it was about the human capability to produce and target such projectiles with precision.
They have 6 more planetary mass drivers, Santos reported.
Each one can fire every 12 minutes.
Basic mathematics suggests that the Vortak fleet has 47 minutes to surrender before we begin systematically destroying their ships one at a time. And if they don't surrender? Vex then asked. Then, we'll demonstrate that humans are very good at mathematics. The Vortak response came 23 minutes later, transmitted on all frequencies in multiple languages including perfectly accented Zephyrian.
Human vessels, this is Fleet Commander Vorthak Tal of the Imperial Conquest Fleet.
Your tactics are unprecedented.
We acknowledge your tactical superiority in this engagement.
Chen activated the fleet communication system. Fleet Commander, this is Admiral Sarah Chen. Are you requesting terms for withdrawal?
We are requesting clarification of your intentions.
Our intentions are simple, Commander. The Zephyrian Confederation requested our assistance in defending their territory.
We intend to provide that assistance until the threat to their civilian population has been eliminated. There was a long pause before Vorthak Tal responded.
Admiral Chen, our intelligence indicated that humans possess primitive technology and limited military experience. This is not primitive technology. Commander, you're absolutely right. By galactic standards, human technology is primitive.
We can't build ships as large as yours, our energy weapons are less powerful than yours, and our defensive systems are inferior to yours.
Then, how?
Because we build tools, Commander.
And we build tools that build tools.
And when we need to solve a problem, we don't just use the tools we have, we build the tools we need.
Chen activated displays showing the full extent of human modifications to the system.
Asteroid mining operations, gravitational field manipulators, planetary mass drivers, mobile manufacturing platforms, and modular ship configurations that allowed rapid adaptation to changing tactical requirements. You came to this system expecting to fight the Zephyrian military, she continued.
Instead, you encountered human engineering. We didn't try to build a fleet that could defeat your fleet. We built a system that could defeat your strategy.
This level of adaptation requires resources we did not anticipate.
It requires creativity, Commander.
And humans have been practicing creativity for a very long time.
The incoming projectile from the first planetary mass driver was now 12 minutes from impact. Vorthak Tal's next transmission carried a tone that no Zephyrian had ever heard from their species: uncertainty.
Admiral Chen, what are your terms? Complete withdrawal from Zephyrian space. Immediate cessation of hostile activities against Zephyrian civilian and military targets. And a formal agreement that the Vorthak Empire will not attempt to enter this region of space again.
And, in exchange? In exchange, we won't demonstrate what our planetary mass drivers can do to your fleet. You would allow us to retreat with our ships intact? Chen paused for several seconds before responding. Commander, humans have a saying, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake.
Your mistake was assuming that because our technology is primitive, our capabilities are limited. We're willing to let you retreat so you can explain to your empire exactly what they learned here today. Which is that humans don't fight fair, and we're really good at not fighting fair. The Vorthak fleet began withdrawing 37 minutes later, 8 minutes before the first planetary mass driver projectile would have reached their position. Their retreat was organized and dignified, but it was unquestionably a retreat. Ships that had conquered 47 star systems were withdrawing from 50 human vessels and some very creative engineering. As the Vorthak fleet cleared the system's outer perimeter, Ambassador Kelthera found herself staring at tactical displays that showed the true scope of what the humans had accomplished. In less than 18 hours, they had transformed an entire star system into a weapon, defeated a fleet that outnumbered them 6-1, and done it without losing a single ship or causing unnecessary casualties. Admiral Chen, she said quietly, when we requested assistance, we were hoping for military advisors and, perhaps some additional ships.
Yes, I remember your message. You sent leaders, engineers, and bombers. But not in the way we expected. Chen smiled. Ambassador, humans learned a long time ago that the best way to win a fight is to make sure it's not a fair fight. You asked for help defending your people. We helped. The method was up to us. Will they return? The Vorthak? Probably not to this region. Word will spread that humans are unpredictable. That's usually enough to discourage future aggression.
General Vex then, who had spent the entire engagement trying to understand human tactics, finally asked the question that had been bothering him since the battle began.
Admiral, how did you know this would work? Your entire strategy depended on the Vorthak responding in predictable ways. General, that's the thing about successful conquerors. Success makes you predictable. The Vorthak have been winning for so long that they've forgotten how to lose. They've never had to adapt because they've never needed to. And humans?
Humans have been losing for most of our history. We've gotten very good at figuring out how to win anyway.
3 days after the Vortak withdrawal, Ambassador Kelthera stood in what had once been the Zephyrian Emergency Command Center, watching human engineering teams dismantling their modifications to the system. The massive gravitational anchors were being carefully removed, the planetary mass drivers were being powered down, and the asteroid mining operations were being converted back to their original purposes. "You're removing everything," she observed to Admiral Chen, who was overseeing the restoration operations. "The emergency is over," Chen replied. "These modifications were designed for a specific threat. Now that the threat has withdrawn, there's no need to maintain weapons systems that could be dangerous to civilian traffic." General Vex then joined them at the observation deck, carrying reports that still seemed to puzzle him. "Admiral, our technical teams have been studying your modifications to our system.
The engineering involved is remarkable. How long would it normally take humans to plan and execute this kind of operation? Under normal circumstances?
Probably 6 months of planning, 3 months of preparation, and at least 2 weeks for implementation."
You did it in 18 hours.
"Yes,
But this wasn't normal circumstances. When someone asks humans for help saving their families, we tend to work faster than usual."
Chen activated her personal data pad, showing fleet status reports from across the human task force.
"Actually, General, that raises an interesting point.
We need to discuss the long-term situation."
Long-term situation?
The Vortak fleet withdrew from this system, but
They didn't withdraw from the region.
according to our intelligence gathering, they're currently regrouping in the Corvani sector, approximately 40 light-years from here.
Kelthera felt her hope beginning to fade. Are you saying they'll return? Not to this system, no.
But they might try to find easier targets in nearby regions.
The Vortak Empire doesn't typically accept defeat gracefully.
Commander Santos approached with detailed star charts showing Vortak fleet movements over the past 72 hours.
"Ambassador, we've been monitoring their communications and movement patterns.
The Vortak are definitely planning something, but they're being much more cautious than before."
More cautious how?
They're requesting detailed intelligence about any system before they commit to an attack. Specifically, they're asking whether humans have any presence in the target areas.
Vexthen's mandibles clicked in amusement. "You've made them afraid of you."
"Not afraid," Chen corrected.
"Wary."
"There's an important difference. Afraid enemies do desperate things. Wary enemies make careful decisions."
"And what decisions are they making?" Santos highlighted several star systems on the galactic map.
"They appear to be targeting regions that are definitely not under human protection. Systems with minimal defensive capabilities and no possibility of human intervention."
Which means they're probably going to attack the Altarian Manufacturing Consortium next.
The Altarians have excellent industrial capacity but virtually no military experience. They'd be perfect targets for traditional Vortak tactics.
Ambassador Kelthera studied the projected attack routes with growing concern.
The Altarians were decent people who had built their civilization around peaceful commerce and manufacturing excellence. They had no experience with military conflict and no reasonable way to defend themselves against the Vortak war machine.
"Admiral, would the Altarians be interested in human assistance?"
"That depends, Ambassador.
Are you asking as a representative of the Zephyrian Confederation, or are you asking as someone who cares about what happens to peaceful civilizations?"
"Both."
Chen smiled.
"Then, yes, I think the Altarians would be very interested in human assistance. But the situation would be different from what we did here."
"Different how?"
"Here, we were defending an established civilization with existing infrastructure and defensive capabilities.
The Altarians don't have military infrastructure.
If we're going to help them, we'd need to build defensive capabilities from scratch."
"Is that possible?"
"Ambassador, 3 days ago you asked if humans could help you fight the most successful military force in this galactic sector.
How did that work out?"
General Vex then consulted his tactical reports.
"Admiral, the Altarian system has certain advantages that this system lacked.
They have extensive manufacturing facilities, abundant raw materials, and a civilian population that's skilled in industrial operations."
"Meaning?"
"Meaning we wouldn't need to build everything ourselves.
We could teach them to build it."
Chen activated secure communication channels to the human fleet.
All department heads, report to the conference center in 2 hours. We're going to discuss expanding our mission parameters. Expanding how? Kelthera asked. Ambassador, when humans decide to help someone, we tend to be thorough about it. The conference that followed involved representatives from every major civilization in the local galactic region.
The Altarians attended virtually, their industrial leaders expressing both gratitude for the offer of assistance and nervousness about involving themselves in military conflict.
The Thesian hegemony sent observers, curious about human capabilities after hearing reports of the Vorthak defeat.
Even the distant Mineral Consortium dispatched representatives to understand what had happened in Zephyrian space.
Admiral Chen began the briefing with a straightforward assessment of the regional situation.
Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, we have a problem.
The Vorthak Empire represents a threat to every peaceful civilization in this sector. They've temporarily withdrawn, but they haven't been defeated.
They're simply looking for easier targets. Altarian Industrial Coordinator Nexus spoke through the virtual connection.
Admiral Chen, we've reviewed the reports of your engagement in Zephyrian space. Your capabilities are impressive, but we must ask, what would human assistance cost us? Coordinator Nexus, that's an excellent question with a complicated answer. Human assistance doesn't cost anything in the traditional sense. We don't want territory, we don't want tribute, and we don't want political control. Then, what do you want?
We want to ensure that the Vorthak Empire understands that attacking peaceful civilizations in this region will be more trouble than it's worth.
Thesian observer Kithara interjected.
Admiral, forgive our skepticism, but galactic history suggests that powerful species always extract something from those they assist.
What are the hidden costs of human protection?
Chen exchanged glances with her staff before responding.
Observer Kithara, humans do expect something from the civilizations we assist. Which is? We expect you to remain civilized. We expect you to continue solving problems through cooperation and trade rather than conquest. We expect you to help other species when they need assistance. Basically, we expect you to continue being the kind of people who deserve help. The conference chamber fell silent as representatives processed the implications of Chen's statement.
Finally, Coordinator Nexus spoke again.
Admiral, assuming we accept human assistance, what would that assistance involve? Commander Santos activated holographic displays showing preliminary plans that had apparently been developed during the 3 days since the Vorthak withdrawal.
Coordinator, human assistance would involve establishing a regional defense network based on shared technology and coordinated response capabilities.
Shared technology?
We would provide manufacturing templates for defensive systems, early warning networks, and rapid response capabilities. Each participating civilization would build these systems using their own resources and adapt them to their specific requirements.
Admiral Chen highlighted specific aspects of the proposed network. The goal isn't to create human colonies or dependencies.
The goal is to create a region of space where the Vorthak Empire or any other aggressive force knows that attack any single system will result in coordinated response from the entire network. A mutual defense alliance, Kelthera realized.
More than that, Ambassador. A mutual development alliance. Human technology sharing would be reciprocal.
We learn from your advances in energy systems, you learn from our manufacturing techniques. Everyone benefits from shared knowledge and coordinated development. General Vex then studied the proposed network carefully.
Admiral, this would require unprecedented cooperation between species with very different cultures and governmental systems.
Yes, it would.
General, is that impossible? Not impossible, but challenging. Humans like challenges.
Over the following hours, the representatives worked through practical details of implementing a regional defense network.
The Altarians would provide manufacturing expertise and industrial capacity.
The Zephyrians would contribute diplomatic experience and energy system technology. The Thesians offered advanced sensor networks and communication systems. Even the Mineral Consortium agreed to provide raw materials and shipping services.
What about command structure?
Observer Kithara asked.
Who would coordinate response to threats? Each system would maintain local command authority, Chen explained. But we'd establish a shared intelligence network and rapid response protocols.
When one system detected a threat, they would immediately notify all other network members.
Response would be coordinated but not centralized. And human oversight? Humans would provide technical advisors and training personnel.
We're not interested in commanding other species' militaries. We're interested in ensuring that those militaries are effective when they need to be.
Coordinator Nexus asked the question that everyone had been considering. Admiral, what happens if the Vortak Empire decides to attack the entire network simultaneously? Chen's expression became serious. Coordinator, that would be a very poor decision on their part. Why?
Because at that point, they wouldn't be attacking individual systems that happen to have human advisors. They'd be attacking allies of the Human Republic. And the Human Republic takes attacks on our allies very seriously.
How seriously?
Seriously enough that the 40 ships you saw here would be considered a diplomatic mission, not a military response. The implications of that statement settled over the conference chamber like a weight that everyone could feel, but nobody wanted to examine too closely.
How many ships could humans deploy for a military response? Vex then asked quietly.
General, humans control 50 star systems and have been expanding at an average rate of 12 new systems per year for the past 2 decades.
How many ships do you think we've built during that time? I don't know. Neither do the Vortak. That's the point. Commander Santos activated additional displays showing long-range sensor readings from the edge of human space.
Actually, we've been monitoring Vortak intelligence gathering operations since we arrived in this region. They've been trying to assess human military capabilities for the past 3 days.
What have they discovered? Nothing conclusive.
Human ship construction takes place in closed systems using manufacturing techniques that don't produce standard energy signatures. Our fleet sizes and capabilities are classified at levels that even we don't discuss openly.
Admiral Chen stood and addressed the assembled representatives directly.
Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, here's what I can tell you about human military capabilities. We have been preparing for interstellar conflict since we first developed faster-than-light travel. We have been building, training, and planning for scenarios that most species prefer not to think about. Such as what happens when a peaceful civilization asks for our help against an enemy that threatens their survival. She paused to let that statement settle before continuing. The Vortak Empire has conquered 47 star systems by being stronger and more ruthless than their opponents. That approach works well against civilizations that fight by the same rules they do.
And if they encounter a civilization that doesn't fight by the same rules?
Chen's smile was the expression of someone who had spent years hoping that nobody would be foolish enough to ask that question.
Then, they discover why humans have conquered 50 star systems without anyone noticing we were conquering them. The Regional Defense Alliance was formally established 6 days later, with technological transfers beginning immediately.
Human engineering teams spread throughout the participating systems, working alongside local specialists to build defensive capabilities that were specifically adapted to each civilization's strengths and requirements. The Vortak Empire, monitoring these developments from their regrouping position in the Corvani sector, found themselves facing a strategic situation they had never encountered before. Instead of isolated systems that could be conquered individually, they now faced a network of interconnected civilizations backed by a species whose capabilities remained ominously unclear. Fleet Commander Vortaktal submitted his final report to the Imperial High Command with recommendations that shocked the military hierarchy: avoid the human-protected region entirely and seek expansion opportunities in distant galactic sectors where human intervention was impossible. For the first time in their history, the Vortak Empire had encountered something they couldn't conquer: the possibility that their next target might fight back harder than they were willing to fight. The age of unopposed Vortak expansion had ended, not with a great battle or a devastating defeat, but with the simple realization that some fights weren't worth fighting. 6 months after the establishment of the Regional Defense Network, Ambassador Kelthera found herself touring a manufacturing facility that would have been impossible to imagine before human involvement in their sector.
The Altarian-Human Joint Manufacturing Complex on Nexus Prime represented something unprecedented in galactic civilization, a factory that could build anything.
The conversion efficiency is remarkable, she commented to Chief Engineer Maria Santos, who had remained in the region to oversee technology transfers. Your manufacturing systems can adapt to produce completely different products within hours. That's the human approach to industrial design, Santos explained, gesturing toward production lines that were currently building components for 3 different types of defensive platforms simultaneously. We don't build factories that make specific things.
We build factories that can make whatever we need them to make.
Altarian coordinator Nexus joined them at the observation platform, his excitement evident despite his species' typically reserved demeanor.
Ambassador Kelthera, you should see the latest production statistics.
We're now manufacturing defensive systems at rates that exceed our original requirements by 300%.
What are you doing with the excess production?
Trading it to other systems in the network. The Thessians particularly value our early warning sensor arrays, while the Mineral Consortium has been requesting our new asteroid processing platforms.
Kelthera nodded approvingly. The network is becoming economically self-sustaining. More than that, Santos added. It's becoming economically advantageous.
Every system in the network is now producing something that other network members want to buy.
Defense cooperation has created trade opportunities that didn't exist before. They were interrupted by alerts from the facility's communication center. Nexus activated his personal interface, reading updates that made his expression shift from excitement to concern. What is it? Kelthera asked. Long-range sensor reports from the outer perimeter. We're detecting unidentified ships approaching the network boundary.
Santos immediately activated secure communication channels.
This is Chief Engineer Santos to Admiral Chen.
We have potential contact with unknown vessels. Please advise.
Chen's response came within seconds.
Santos, we've been monitoring the situation. Unknown vessels are transmitting identification codes that match Corvan Republic signatures.
The Corvani?
But, their space is on the far side of Vorthak territory.
Yes.
Which suggests they either fought their way through Vorthak space, or they found another route.
Either possibility is interesting. Should we treat them as potential threats? Treat them as potential refugees until we know more. And, Santos?
Make sure our friends understand that this might be about to get complicated. The Corvan fleet, when it finally reached the network's primary communication relay, consisted of 17 vessels in various states of damage. Their lead ship transmitted a message that was simultaneously a diplomatic contact and a plea for assistance.
Regional Defense Network, this is Admiral Corvanseth of the Corvan Republic Emergency Fleet. We request immediate sanctuary and assistance.
Our home systems have fallen to Vorthak invasion forces. We are carrying approximately 50,000 civilian refugees and are running low on supplies. Ambassador Kelthera found herself facing exactly the kind of crisis that the defense network had been designed to address, but from an unexpected direction. The Corvani weren't asking for help defending their territory, they were asking for help because their territory no longer existed. Admiral Corvanseth, this is Ambassador Kelthera of the Zephyrian Confederation. You have sanctuary within network space. We're dispatching medical and supply vessels to your position immediately.
Thank you, Ambassador.
But, I must warn you, our escape was not unnoticed.
Vorthak pursuit fleets are approximately 7 days behind us. How many pursuit fleets? Our best estimate is 40 to 50 vessels. They're commanded by War Leader Vorthmak, one of their most experienced commanders.
Chief Engineer Santos activated emergency protocols throughout the network.
All systems, this is Santos. We have incoming refugees with hostile pursuit. Estimated time to contact is 7 days. Implement Defense Protocol 7 immediately.
The response was swift and coordinated in ways that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Manufacturing facilities throughout the network shifted production to emergency military supplies. Sensor networks activated extended monitoring protocols.
Communication systems began coordinating what would become the largest joint military operation in regional history.
But, the most significant response came from Admiral Chen, who arrived at the Network Coordination Center within 18 hours accompanied by ships that the regional allies had never seen before.
Admiral, Kelthera greeted her, those vessels, they're much larger than the ships you brought to our system. Yes. These are what we call problem solvers. We've been building them in the outer systems while our engineering teams worked on the defense network.
General Vex then studied the new human ships with professional interest.
Admiral, these vessels appear to be configured for extended independent operations. Correct.
They're designed to operate far from human space for months at a time.
Each ship carries manufacturing capability, resource extraction equipment, and enough personnel to establish forward operating bases wherever they're needed. Forward operating bases? General, the Vortak pursuit fleet represents a different kind of threat than we faced before. They're not trying to conquer territory, they're trying to eliminate witnesses to their defeat in Corvan space.
Commander Santos highlighted intelligence gathered from the Corvan refugees. War leader Vorthmak commanded the forces that conquered the Corvan Republic. According to refugee reports, he's specifically ordered to pursue and eliminate any Corvan survivors who might spread word of Vortak tactics and capabilities.
Why would that concern them?
Because the Corvani fought back more effectively than the Vortak expected.
The conquest took 3 months instead of 3 weeks. Other civilizations are starting to ask questions about Vortak invincibility. Admiral Chen activated holographic displays showing Vortak expansion patterns over the past year. The Vortak Empire depends on their reputation for overwhelming success.
If word spreads that they can be fought, resisted, and sometimes defeated, their expansion strategy becomes much more difficult.
So they're pursuing the refugees to maintain their reputation? They're pursuing the refugees to eliminate evidence that the Vortak can be beaten.
Kelthera studied the tactical situation carefully.
Admiral, can the network defensive systems handle 50 Vortak vessels? Ambassador, that's not the right question.
What is the right question?
The right question is whether we want to handle them defensively. Chen activated additional displays showing human fleet movements throughout the region.
War leader Vorthmak is bringing 50 vessels to attack a network that now includes 6 star systems with coordinated defenses, shared intelligence, and manufacturing capabilities that have been optimized for military production.
You're saying we outnumber them?
I'm saying they've made the mistake of bringing a conquest fleet to fight a prepared defense network backed by humans who have had 6 months to get creative.
The engagement began 5 days later when Vortak scout vessels encountered the network's outer sensor perimeter.
Instead of the isolated defensive stations they expected to find, they discovered a detection grid that immediately transmitted their positions to every system in the network. War leader Vorthmak, commanding from his massive flagship, reviewed the intelligence reports with growing confusion. The sensor readings indicated defensive preparations far beyond what any single system should have been capable of deploying. War leader, his tactical advisor reported, were detecting coordinate defensive systems spanning multiple star systems.
This appears to be some kind of alliance. What kind of alliance? Unknown.
Our intelligence indicated that these species had no history of military cooperation.
And, now? Now they appear to be operating as a unified defensive force.
Vorthmak studied the tactical displays, recognizing patterns that reminded him of the unexpected resistance his forces had encountered in Corvan space.
Are there any signs of human involvement?
War leader, our sensors are detecting ship configurations that match reports from the Zephyrian engagement 6 months ago.
How many human ships? Difficult to determine.
Their vessels appear to be integrated with local defensive forces in ways that make individual ship identification challenging.
Best estimate?
Possibly as few as 20 vessels, but they're supported by local forces that have been equipped with unfamiliar technology. Vorthmak made the decision that would define the engagement. All ships maintain fleet formation and advance toward the primary population center. We will overwhelm their defenses through superior firepower and concentrated assault.
The decision was tactically sound according to traditional Vortak doctrine. It was also exactly what Admiral Chen had expected. All network forces, this is Admiral Chen. Enemy fleet is advancing in standard Vortak formation toward the Eltarian system. Implement Response Protocol 12.
Response Protocol 12 was something that had been developed specifically for this scenario, a concentrated Vortak assault against prepared network defenses. It required precise timing, perfect coordination between multiple species, and technology that had been specifically designed to counter Vortak tactical advantages. The first surprise for the Vortak fleet came when their approach to the Eltarian system triggered defensive responses from star systems they weren't even attacking. The network's shared intelligence and coordination protocols meant that an assault on one system was immediately met with support from all other systems. War leader, his advisor reported with evident confusion, we're detecting defensive fire from systems outside our target area.
How is that possible? The network appears to include weapon systems capable of cross-system targeting. Show me.
The tactical display revealed something that challenged every assumption Vorthmak had made about regional defensive capabilities. The planetary mass drivers that humans had installed throughout the network were capable of launching projectiles across interstellar distances with precision targeting that should have been impossible. They're using multiple star systems as a single defensive platform, he realized. The first cross-system projectile arrived 17 minutes later, striking a Vortak heavy cruiser with kinetic energy that penetrated its shields and hull as if they were paper. The projectile had been launched from a mass driver located 3 star systems away, but it struck its target with accuracy that suggested sensor coordination across impossible distances. War Leader, we're detecting additional projectiles in transit. Multiple launch points, staggered arrival times. How many projectiles? Current count is 47, with more launching every few minutes. Vorthmak found himself facing the same tactical nightmare that had driven the Vortak Empire to avoid this region entirely. The network had turned multiple star systems into weapon components of a defensive machine that operated on a scale no single fleet could match. All ships, disperse formation and engage evasive maneuvers. But dispersing the fleet only exposed individual ships to the network's other surprise, human vessels that had been waiting in carefully chosen positions throughout the system, armed with weapons that had been specifically designed for this engagement. The human ships didn't try to match Vortak vessels in direct combat. Instead, they used the same tactics that had proven successful 6 months earlier, but refined and improved through months of preparation and practice. Admiral Chen, General Vex then reported from the Coordination Center, human vessels are engaging individual Vortak ships while they're separated from fleet support. Confirmed. We're not fighting their fleet, General. We're fighting their individual ships while they're isolated and confused. The Vortak retreat began 43 minutes after the engagement started, when War Leader Vorthmak realized that his 50-vessel fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that refused to concentrate in any location where he could bring his superior firepower to bear. War Leader, his communications officer reported, were receiving a transmission from the human commander. Admiral Chen? Yes, War Leader. She's requesting that you heave to and prepare for boarding. Boarding? She says she has questions about Corvan Republic civilian casualties, and she expects answers. Vorthmak stared at his tactical displays, watching his proud fleet being dismantled by an enemy that treated his ships like problems to be solved rather than opponents to be fought. For the first time in his military career, he found himself considering the possibility that surrender might be preferable to continued combat. Signal the fleet, he ordered quietly. Cease fire and heave to. War Leader? We're going to answer Admiral Chen's questions. The interrogation that followed established several important precedents in galactic warfare. For the first time in recorded history, a Vortak war leader was held personally accountable for civilian casualties during conquest operations. War leader Vorthmak found himself explaining, in detail, exactly what his forces had done in Corvan space and why. Admiral Chen's questions were precise, methodical, and absolutely relentless. By the time the interrogation concluded, she had extracted complete intelligence about Vortak military capabilities, tactical doctrines, and expansion plans for the next 5 years. War Leader, she said finally, you're going to return to Vortak space and deliver a message for us. What message? That the regional defense network is now expanding to include refugee populations from any system attacked by Vortak forces. And that future attacks on civilians will be met with the same response you experienced here. Admiral, my government will not accept limitations on our expansion policies. Chen's smile was the expression of someone who had anticipated that response and prepared accordingly. War Leader, your government is welcome to test that assumption. But they should understand that this engagement involved 6 star systems and took 43 minutes. If they force us to respond with our full capabilities, they might find the experience educational. What do you mean? I mean that humans have been building defensive networks for 6 months while your empire was celebrating its conquest of the Corvan Republic. This network now includes 14 star systems, and we're just getting started. Vorthmak returned to Vortak space 3 weeks later with a report that fundamentally changed his empire's expansion strategy. The regional defense network was no longer a local alliance of convenient targets, it was becoming a military force capable of projecting power across multiple galactic sectors. The Vortak Empire, faced with the choice between continued expansion and potential war with an enemy whose capabilities remained unclear, chose discretion over valor and redirected their conquest fleets toward distant regions where human intervention was impossible. The age of Vortak dominance in the local galactic sector had ended, replaced by something unprecedented, a voluntary alliance of free civilizations that had learned to defend themselves and each other. And, at the center of that alliance, Admiral Sarachan continued building tools that might someday be needed to solve problems that hadn't been identified yet, because humans had learned that the best way to maintain peace was to be prepared for the possibility that someone might mistake kindness for weakness. The galaxy had discovered that humans kept their promises, whether those promises involved helping refugees find new homes or ensuring that aggressive empires learned the cost of threatening peaceful civilizations.
Some lessons, Chen reflected, were worth teaching very thoroughly.